I do not recommend watching this video at night because these are some of the scariest stories I've ever read on the internet. Mimics are spirits that can imitate familiar faces and voices. I'll make a dedicated video on theories about mimics another day, but for now, let's just have a spooky story time with the scariest mimic stories on Reddit. This story is from user ittybitty216, and it is truly terrifying. Around 15 years ago, when both of my kids were toddlers, I was putting them to bed one night, and my son was adamant that he wear his favorite red race car pajamas. I happily obliged, helped him change into them, and tucked him into bed. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with a friend who had come over to chat and catch up. The way that my apartment was set up, you could see my kids' bedroom doorway from the kitchen table. My friend and I were talking for a while before we were suddenly interrupted by the sound of my son screaming. We both turned and looked at the bedroom doorway and saw my son standing there, loudly crying, shrieking, and wearing his green pajamas with airplanes on them. Everything inside of me was screaming that this was wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end and a cold shiver shot down my spine. My friend and I wordlessly stared at each other for a second. We both knew that my son couldn't change his pajamas by himself yet. We looked back at the doorway and my son was gone. We ran to the bedroom and I found him tucked in bed, still sleeping peacefully in his red race car pajamas. My friend asked me if I saw him standing there in his green airplane pajamas and I confirmed that I had. My friend freaked out and left. I slept on my kids' bedroom floor that night to make sure nothing happened to them. My friend and I still talk about it to this day. It's one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me. My son, of course, doesn't remember any of it, but he loves hearing the story of how his doppelganger scared the crap out of us. This next story was posted by Suspicious Orange 71. My dad crawled out from under my bed. I was around 6 when it happened. My parents had tucked me in for bed. I live in the rural countryside, so nighttime is very quiet, no sounds of cars. It's usually very peaceful. I was laying on my back when suddenly I heard the sound of long nails scratching the wood under my bed. The reason this incident sticks out to me is because I can still remember the feeling of my heart dropping out of my stomach and feeling paralyzed with fear. I was about to call out for my parents when my dad crawled out from under my bed and stood up in the dark looking at me. He said, "You forgot to say your prayers," then walked out of the room. I was understandably shocked. I did not leave my bed afterwards and must have fallen asleep at some point. My dad would normally tell me to say my prayers before bed, so this seemed like something he would say, but I have no idea what would possess him to hide under my bed. My dad denies ever doing this. I brought it up numerous times over the years, but he has never admitted to doing it. I never really considered until recently that he definitely doesn't have nails long enough to make the deep scratching sound I heard. This next story is from user Sometimes Jack. This happened to my friend. She came home at about 1 a.m. and the house was dark. On entering, she heard her mom say, "Hello, Jill," from just outside the kitchen door. She was a bit sketched out as to why her mother would just be standing in the dark, but assumes she's just about to go to bed and has been locking up. She asked her mom why she was down there, but she just got, "Hello, Jill," again. She turned on the light and nothing was there. Her mother was upstairs asleep. Nothing else happened though, and that was her only experience. This final story is from user Hawaiian Gremlin. We stayed in this extremely old, creepy cabin in Montana. It was in the middle of nowhere, and it was so old that it didn't even have a bathroom, just an outhouse. There was a rope that went from the cabin to the outhouse so you could navigate back and forth at night because it was pitch black. The cabin was super unsettling and had some strange details about it. The strangest being that there was this really tall bed in the upstairs loft where you had to climb the stairs, get onto the bed, and under the bed was this child-sized door that locked from the outside. Just bizarre. So one night, my mom's dead asleep when she wakes up out of the blue feeling really afraid. She opens her eyes to see my stepdad just staring at her with freakishly wide eyes, a scary grin, and she said he just looked horrifying. He said, "How are you feeling?" This makes sense because the first day we got there, she got really sick and stayed that way the entire trip. As soon as he said this, she heard footsteps approaching. When she looked to see who was coming up the stairs, it was none other than my stepdad. He had gone to use the outhouse and was confused when she told him what had happened. She turned back to see who was in bed with her, but nobody was there. It scared the shit out of her, and we left the next morning. She also felt better within hours of getting on the road. Mimic stories always freak me out so bad. I had to sleep with the lights on after reading these ones. Let me know if you want a part 2.